I always feel there is a power dynamics. So supervisor is expert. So she holds the expert position. She has the power. It's a general perception. And then it depends on the supervisor how she can provide that comfort or environment or safe place to supervise it, to share, to ask question. At the same time, how she model feedback from the supervisee. So once it started, in my experience, I can feel that power dynamics. And however, how I move forward, it's my responsibility to minimize that power dynamics and through different strategies. So yeah, it's there. Supervisor, it's like teacher. Firstly, supervisor is like teacher, faculty member, senior, and expert.
That's awesome, Sabiha. So I wonder if you could share with us some of the types of strategies you have used in the past when you're with a supervisee and you notice that he or she is perhaps not sharing some of her vulnerabilities because she might be afraid of a power dynamic. And what are the kinds of, how did you deal with that situation to help her feel safe?
Okay. So firstly, I always used to communicate supervising. So rather supervisee always contact me for next schedule or something like this. So it shares that I have the responsibility and I am giving this priority to you. So that's one thing. And another one, I always ask supervisor to give feedback to me and the supervision session. And then I ask that, then I share my thoughts about her skills and her whatever she is doing, what is like that, and how she can improve, and what are my observations. So it seems to me that I am modeling first, and then she is doing the feedback. So at the same time, as a person, I am very accepting. So everybody knows. So maybe that one thing, my most of the supervisees feel the same, that I am accepting, and they can share their faults with me without any hesitation. So this is my personal image, but it remains at the department. So supervisees always knows and understand with the process that Sabiha is like this. So that's one thing I can share. At the same time, the supervision session is very crucial. So how I am attentive to that time, how I am um, prioritizing her needs and her personal well-beings, that actually make the safe place for both, for the supervisor and the supervisee. And I can add one challenge. So that one is frequent rescheduling. So once the supervisor is rescheduling the supervision session, this safe place can be hampered.
I wonder if you could share with us some of the types of strategies you have used in the past when you're with a supervisee and you notice that he or she is perhaps not sharing some of her vulnerabilities because she might be afraid of a power dynamic. And what are the kinds of, how did you deal with that situation to help her feel safe?
Okay. So firstly, I always used to communicate supervising. So rather supervisee always contact me for next schedule or something like this. So it shares that I have the responsibility and I am giving this priority to you. So that's one thing. And another one, I always ask supervisor to give feedback to me and the supervision session. And then I ask that, then I share my thoughts about her skills and her whatever she is doing, what is like that, and how she can improve, and what are my observations. So it seems to me that I am modeling first, and then she is doing the feedback. So at the same time, as a person, I am very accepting. So everybody knows. So maybe that one thing, my most of the supervisees feel the same, that I am accepting, and they can share their faults with me without any hesitation. So this is my personal image, but it remains at the department. So supervisees always knows and understand with the process that Sabiha is like this. So that's one thing I can share. At the same time, the supervision session is very crucial. So how I am attentive to that time, how I am um, prioritizing her needs and her personal well-beings, that actually make the safe place for both for the supervisor and the supervisee. And I can add one challenge. So that one is frequent rescheduling. So once the supervisor is rescheduling the supervision session, this safe place can be hampered.
I'm wondering, how do you notice that it takes some time, or for, what am I trying to say, for a supervisee to be able to start developing trust and saying what they really think? And if so, how long does it take? So for example, session one, I can't imagine that you would go in and say, now tell me what you think you did wrong in that session. Not that you would ever say that's a terrible example, but you know what I mean. So do you sort of find in your experience that it develops over time, and how much time does it take?
That I'm not sure, but yeah, it really takes time. At the same time, I must say that um, um, supervisee supervisee over time, supervisee has developed an unique image for the supervisor. So initially, it's a kind of blur and hazy, but over time, supervisory can define the supervisor that she is like this. So how much time it will take, that I'm not sure, but it depends on co-construction, how I have run the first session, and how I can feel the warmth and relationship, the trust issue within with this relationship. And if supervisee can feel the level, he or she can definitely um, plan for the next one. If she has this mind that this supervisee um, is not in a position to trust me, then maybe she can develop some strategy for the next one. And as I said, what I usually, because they are very new in their placements, So they usually do a lot of things. They themselves understand that few things are right, few things are not. So in such cases, if they don't open up, I always mention all general mistakes that usually people done. So I use the language that not all supervisees are doing these mistakes, but in initial stages people are doing this, that we can be more aware. So in when I use this language, she got that message that okay, maybe I did something. Then most of the cases she admitted that one in the next session. So I followed the general principles, general prescriptions, mentioning all possible mistakes, and just ask him to be aware and get back to me if she noticed some. And they usually come back to me.
That's lovely. So you're normalizing some of the
Yeah.
things for them so they realize, oh, it's not just me and it's
Mm,
okay to admit
mm.
those things. That's great. Um, Omar, do you have anything to add to what Sabiha's saying? It's okay if you don't, but I just thought you might have some things that you might want to say.
I always try to try to create an environment that is conducive and that is helpful to the supervisors. So I always look forward to their suggestions, how we can mutually do that. So that's what I really focus on. I always do that.
So if you have a supervisee and you've said to them, do you have any suggestions about how we can create supervision the way you'd like or something like that? And they say, no, it's perfect. It's great. What are your strategies to help understand what they really think without making them feel unsafe?
Well, what I use is I ask them, how useful did you find the supervision session? So on a scale of 0 to 10, then let's say he or she says 5. Then I ask, what would we have done so that the rating would be higher, would have been higher, right? So that's how they start opening up, they start expressing what they really needed, and how they could open themselves up without hesitation and without any hindrance. So that's that's what I always find useful.
That's great. Using the scale of 0 to 10. Do you find ever that they say, yeah, it was 10, it was perfect?
Yeah, some of them say yes, 10 out of 10. Then I ask, how uh, what is the components that we discussed in the supervision session that made you rate 10 out of 10? So then I focus on these specific issues. I keep that in mind so that in the next supervision session I can maximize those, right? So that's how I strategize supervision sessions.
I want to ask you both about, in Australia, more and more, we're seeing different people from different backgrounds and different identities. And so, as a supervisor, we have to be mindful of adapting and being flexible to different cultures and different backgrounds. From your perspective, and again, it's a big generalization, so I'm really sorry for that, but it would be helpful to give some of your insights. if you have someone from a Bangladesh background speaking to someone from a different culture, perhaps a higher income culture, like a Western culture, say American or English culture, giving supervision or having a consultation type relationship, are there any things that we should be mindful of in terms of cultural cultural sensitivities or things that you think might be happening? And I'm very sorry about the way I'm saying all of this. It's quite I'm trying to phrase it in a sensitive way as well.
Okay. So firstly, language. Maybe um, 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 communicating in English or different language can be difficult for them. Sometimes people might not ask questions due to how maybe I might say wrong, or I might make sentence with mistakes, something like this. And another is, as Asians, I can say that when we say no, this is not no, this is something else. Or when we say yes, this is something, there might be something other than yes. So they have some different meanings. But they directly say, yeah, it's perfect, yeah, it's not. So they tend to rate higher. They tend to rate higher, even in our family sessions also. The newer generations are not doing well, rating higher, but the people in middle aged or my age, they are just say that yeah, this is best. So I can say that the people from new generation, they are um, tend to be more direct and specific. Other than we Asians have uh, this passiveness, or uh, this different meaning, that the meta communication inside us.
I can share one of my experiences while I was working at an NGO. So we had a supervisor who was living abroad, maybe in some of European countries. I don't remember. So we had a time difference, time zone difference. So mostly we used to have supervision sessions at night, and which was very odd time. So I I found that not all supervisors were comfortable at that time. So the time difference can be a challenging issue. Other than this, what Sabiha said, I completely agree with her that language was a huge barrier for all of us, because we are not comfortable talking in English, and as we are not conducting our sessions in English, rather in Bangla. So uh, when you are having the session in Bangla, but you are discussing your issues with your supervisor in English, that makes the supervision session a bit difficult.
Do you have any suggestions, recommendations for Australian supervisors when it comes to how they can make sure that they're supporting the supervision sessions the best, taking into account language and what you said, the tendency to not really say what people really mean? Do you have any advice for them so that they can try to alter and adapt their supervision?
Um, I would recommend the supervisors to be very open, whatever it is, And I would also recommend to create an environment that supervisors can bring up anything without the fear of being judged. Okay. I think these are the core components that we need to take into account while designing our supervision session.
Are there any ways that you can help Australians understand how they can show that they're open and they can show that they're not judging, whether they say it or whether they do it? Or more, can you help us understand how to do that in a culturally understandable way?
It's a bit tricky question. Um, I think being flexible, being cordial and attentive to what the supervisors are bringing up, and and uh, and providing an option that you can always reach me out if you need anything. So that's very I'm sorry. So that's very crucial to leave an option that whatever it is, the supervisors can always reach out to the supervisor. So that makes us feel more connected to the person we are dealing with or we are working with.
That's really interesting. In Australian culture, I would say, especially professionally as psychologists, we're taught to be very boundaried. So our time is very boundaried, our space. So I only speak to you when we've allocated this time. And if I haven't allocated this time, then it's my time or it's time for other things. And I do notice in other cultures, um, it's not so rigid, it's more flexible, like you say. So it's a meeting of the cultures and a co-created dynamic. And so it's really good for Australian supervisors to have that conversation with the supervisees to explain what their boundaries are, but that it doesn't necessarily mean that we're not caring or that we're not there for you, but that in our culture, this is the way we've done things, and have a conversation and see where that lands. Does that sound okay to you? If a supervisor and a supervisee group were to have that sort of conversation about what messages it sends if there are boundaries?
I think it is okay. It is okay to discuss boundaries of both sides. Yeah.
That's great.
May I add 2 points with Omar? So yeah, it's good to have to settle the boundary for all of us. Number one. Number two, I'm not sure whether we can think of um, another another platform for communication like WhatsApp group. So other than group supervision session, so maybe they can easily communicate with their peers and their supervisors and local supervisors, that can have that openness and easy communication between all of them. Number two. Number three, sometimes um, regarding non-judgmental, sometimes reframing help a lot. Like when a supervisor said that I couldn't do that, so supervisor can say that you were trying to do it more elegantly or more in a more perfectly, so that communicate the supervisor that I couldn't do, that's not the thing, I tried something, that's the thing. Sometimes this reframing help the supervisor, that whatever I did, whether it's wrong, whether it's right, whether it's less than the standard, I try it and that appreciated by the supervisor.
One of the things that I wondered about and noticed is power dynamics of, position. So whether you're a professor, whether you're a psychiatrist, whether you're senior in some way, and also gender in other cultures can be a big issue. So I'm just wondering whether that's something that Australian supervisors should be conscious of. Whether, for example, as an Australian supervisor, I'm a female speaking to a male supervisee, or the other way around. What are the things we should be mindful of?
I don't think so that gender would be issue. Omar can confirm or Omar can add. But as for practitioners, gender, I don't think that would be an issue. For general clarification and for general boundaries fixing would be okay. Yeah. So they, from the background as a professional, I don't think so. Gender would be an issue.
Yeah, to some extent, I agree with Sabihabu, but I have a different observation. So, in our culture, some people like to wear hijab, female and burqa. So, let's say if a supervisor comes up with a case that involves sexual dysfunction or maybe sexually related problem, then the supervisor finds that the supervisor is adhering to religious practices, customs, and rules. So that might be a barrier for the supervisors to discuss the case. So I'm not making any generalization, but I have an observation from one of my colleagues. So that might be very difficult to discuss with someone who is not sharing my religious or philosophical views. So if the supervisor finds that there is a difference, then I think that can be an issue. But what Sabiha said, I completely agree with her that ideally there shouldn't have any concern like this, because we are going through or we have gone through the same practice, same training, and same skills, irrespective of our religious and social or whatever you say.
Something, but I've noticed sometimes that when you're in a big group, when people are in a big group, and there are more senior people in the group, and the senior person says something that might be incorrect, very few people will disagree. In Asian cultures, I find they usually just agree, even if they know that it's wrong. For example, someone might say, yes, we sent out the surveys yesterday, and then we might know, we haven't sent them out yet, but we won't disagree because we don't want to embarrass them or correct them in front of a big group. So I'm just wondering whether that is something that happens in your culture, or, for example, Australians don't usually have a problem correcting information. It's a bit more of a flat hierarchy culturally. In Bangladesh culture, is there a hierarchy that people follow, or is it not such a problem? Well, not problem, but not such a consideration is probably a better word.
I think it can happen in our culture. Maybe seniors, when seniors do some mistakes, it may restrict other voices. Omar?
Yeah, totally agree with her. We don't tend to correct others because sometimes we think that it's a very disrespectful way to respond to someone's actions. Yeah.
Okay, that's really good to know, because one of the things that I'm always mindful of and we discuss about is to respect the hierarchy and the way people interact in hierarchy in other cultures, and not try to flatten that hierarchy. So sometimes I've seen supervisors try to flatten a hierarchy. For example, in a group, there might be, a male that's really senior and a female who's really junior. And I've seen a supervisor from Australia try to equalize them so that because that's what they are comfortable with. But I've seen that become not so helpful, because outside of that supervision group, that hierarchy still exists and it's not so safe for them. So I'm wondering if that fits for you as well, that strategy of not trying to change a hierarchy structure within the supervision group if it exists outside of the supervision group.
I'm not sure. Maybe we can think more, because I was thinking that um, those who are in our local supervisor list, whether they have any issues with one of the participant, or any conflict, or any other professional issues with any of the participants, because they are from same context. So I think we should take and be aware of that. Omar?
Yeah, I think that can be an issue, but I would suggest the Australian supervisors to diffuse the power balance, in such a way so that there should not be any hierarchical positions. So we are all here to share our cases, to if how we can effectively deal with our clients. That is the prime concern, instead of who are who is superior and who is effectively dealing the cases. So I think instead of focusing on that issue, we can create an environment so that everyone feels comfortable irrespective of their managerial positions. So that can be very difficult for the Australian supervisors to diffuse the positions in the supervision session. Yeah.
I think what I'm hearing is that you think it's about creating a safe space irrespective of the hierarchical position, and perhaps if it's very complicated, that supervisors can bring that issue to a external peer group where we discuss these kinds of issues together on how we might diffuse them in a safe way.
Maybe we can talk a little bit more about, I suppose, the practitioner's expectations, right? And I mean, how do you, as the clinical supervisor, how do you manage a space where people want to become experts, right? Want to learn EMDR, want to learn other approaches that might not be relevant to a context like this, right? But at the same time, really promoting, I suppose, client-centered practice and approaches, right? Because it's a difficult space to navigate, that one, isn't it? Because on one hand, you can understand why someone would want to come to clinical supervision, right? They want to come because they want to improve their capacity, right, as a therapist. But also knowing that, the skills in which, the clinical supervisor might invest, right, in, I suppose, in supporting the counselor to understand might not necessarily have any relevance to people in the field whatsoever, right? So I suppose in, coming to terms with that sort of complex dynamics. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing to talk about from our previous experiences that, yeah, often practitioners are coming with a desire to learn about, specific therapies, and that's very connected with a desire to be doing evidence-based work.
Yes.
And it might be, yes, I want to learn narrative exposure therapy or EMDR, but the clinical situations that they're faced with don't actually call for that. So, for example, if you're only going to see someone once, well, then you can't do trauma-focused therapy with them. And then in addition to that, we're working in a context where people have limited access to the kind of apprenticeship model training that we have in Australia, where you get to learn from the supervisor about the basic skills of being a therapist, which are, nonverbal communication, how to build a safe environment, how to listen actively and effectively, how to formulate a case, how to make a treatment plan. Like all of these things are stuff that we learn on the job, but which, are not recognized as being as legitimate as, being trained in prolonged exposure or something like that. So people are often coming with an expectation that they're going to be taught specific therapies. But what we want to encourage is that while that expectation is really understandable, and definitely we want to share everything we can about specific therapies, what our job really needs to be is to support people to build the skills to create a safe environment that make the use of those therapies possible. So there's a lot of work that needs to happen up front in order to manage people's expectations so that, we can meet their needs, but also make sure that we're helping people to build practice which is going to address the needs of the people they're working.
And I suppose, when you have a situation where people are wanting to, gain specific clinical skills in a certain intervention, well, they're wanting to use that as well in the field, right? So then you have a circumstance whereby it might not necessarily be relevant, but people are doing that because they want to gain experience in that particular approach, right? And I think maybe, one of the things that we can focus on in, the supervision, in acknowledging that people want to, improve their skills in such, but also, around maybe preferencing approaches whereby people can take, clients and consumers along with the process, and it's a mutual exchange, and they can be able to properly tell the individual what they're doing and how they can be a partner in that, right? Because for the most part, there's been such a disempowerment amongst not just the Rohingya, but communities all around the world that don't have access to opportunities for self-determination, in that, there's this imposition of things that are done to them, right? And it's not just, it's in Australia too, and, people don't know what is, people have things done to them, and they're just supposed to accept that this is good for them, right? Or, from the expert who knows better than them, right? And they're sort of just, because that's, that's just how it is. But really moving away from that notion, and trying to, establish I suppose, a therapeutic environment that acknowledges people's own skills, but also the innate skills and, coping abilities from the the beneficiaries themselves. And I think that term as well is also problematic. There's a lot of problematic talk within humanitarian contexts, right? But trying to find opportunities for empowerment and for it to be more of a mutual exchange, right? In acknowledging the inherent